This is Beyond a Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get on a Church Big Gun Mandate. Get on. Welcome to the best 15 minutes or so in the universe. It's Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. Adam Carolla, Mark Garrigus in his New York City office.
Fully equipped, compliments of Gary, Patrick Smith, and Tyler over here. It's amazing.
Oh, it sounds beautiful.
It does sound good. All right, well, let's not waste
let me
time.
just start off because I want you to figure this out for me. I don't get it. So the big story, the legal story that has evolved between Laguna Seca and now is Elon Musk, other than, Laguna Seca, but we'll deal with that in due course, pun intended, is Elon Musk supposedly making a bid for Twitter, then Twitter doing a poison pill, which they were going to cap 15%. And everybody was prognosticating that was going to be the end of that. He wasn't going to be able to buy Twitter. And then with lightning speed on Sunday, he and the board came around to doing it. I apparently missed the memo on my side of the aisle. We're supposed to be very angry on the left that Musk has bought Twitter, and I just finished reading yet another article calling him the red-pilled MAGA meme lord, I think is what they called him, and everybody's going apoplectic. What did I miss that all of a sudden a guy wanting to buy the platform that most of the people who are going crazy about the limiting of free speech wants to allow people to not be censored? I'm missing something. Give me the crystal analysis because I don't get it.
Well, I think you are, a libertarian Democrat in the 1990s version of that definition. So by that definition, you would be happy that somebody bought a platform like Twitter and opened it up. And you, because you're consistent and you're not swaying with whatever way the whimsical political winds are blowing, are confused by it. But if you're newer and you're newer to the left side of the aisle, then you don't share these thoughts. I really think we really need to define leftist versus liberal, because they used to just mean the same thing. It's now at a point where you're liberal, but you're not leftist. Leftist, liberal is we want college campuses open to all forms of speech and debate. And leftist is we don't want Ben Shapiro coming to this campus or we will burn the fucking auditorium down.
Or if we're Yale Law School, we're going to shout down somebody who's from the Federalist Society because, of course, why would you want lawyers in training to understand diametrically or a dialectic or contrary opinions? Because God forbid that you're not going to find a safe place, which, by the way, Adam, I'm doing stream of consciousness. There was an 11th Circuit opinion. This kind of plays right into this by a judge. And if I'm not mistaken, a Clinton appointee that I pointed out to Gary. Gary, can you pull up the language for Adam? Because it's astonishing that it was a U.S. Supreme, or not a U.S. Supreme, a circuit court case, which may make its way. And regarding what's going on in college campuses, and you'll be shocked at the language that they use because it echoes one of the documentaries you've done.
So I'll just read the excerpts that we highlighted when we did Beyond on Sunday. A university that has placed its highest premium on the protection of feelings or safe intellectual space has abandoned its core mission. The protection of feelings or the creation of safe spaces rightly might be the foremost goal in some settings, like at a family dinner, but it is not right for a university. Its unambiguous mission must remain the pursuit of truth.
Very well said. But I think there's a core here. And I think that folks need to understand what's going on. The principal core is obviously the folks on the left looked at Twitter as a platform that benefited their side of the aisle. Otherwise, they wouldn't all be squealing like stuck pigs now when someone who's more in the center and more libertarian and more free speech, so methinks thus protests too much or object too much, which is or protest too much. So why are you protesting so much? Number one, if this is just a neutrally based platform, why are you all screaming from the left? How come everyone on the right is cheering for this? But here's what we're getting down to, I think, is a kind of a core principle, which is the left looks at these platforms as sort of their own so that they can get the truth out. They look at the right as wanting to use the platform to give out false, misleading hate speech and misinformation, blah, blah, blah. The reality is the left does want to have these platforms to get their message across. Elon Musk just wants to get the truth out and just the dialogue out. It's not his dialogue. It's not the right's truth. It's just dialogue. So, I mean, when it comes to, 10 seconds ago, we just had COVID. The left's version of COVID was everyone needs to lock down, shut the schools, double mask, no walking on horse trails. The right's version of, well, we need to reopen the schools. We need to focus on small businesses. We need to sequester if you're immunocompromised or elderly, and the kids need to go back to school. Those were the two competing messages. The left liked the idea that all their messages were being echoed on Twitter, and anyone who came out against their orthodoxy was being shut down on Twitter. Elon Musk is saying, you are allowed to say stay home, mask up, and shut the schools down. And then you're also allowed to say masks aren't effective, schools should be open, and we don't need to lock down society for something that affects the elderly and the morbidly obese. That's all he's saying. He's not saying you can't say what you're saying. He's saying you can't shut down the other people from saying what they're saying, or, look no further than the Hunter Biden laptop. The Hunter Biden laptop exists. Every day more damning evidence comes out. It's abundantly clear, and it's always been abundantly clear, that this was not Russian tomfoolery. This was a real thing. Anyone who looked into it for more than 10 minutes understood that. The left didn't like that message, so they used Twitter to not spread the message and shut down anyone who said anything about the authenticity of the Hunter Biden laptop. Now they don't have that tool anymore, and there's an election coming up. That's why they're all going like stuck pigs. You're thinking like an old school libertarian, which is, hey, this is just free speech. They're not into free speech. They have an agenda. They can't say it out loud, but they are saying it out loud by protesting too much.
Well, what's interesting to me is if you're thinking about this in, the fixation on Trump, then Trump famously started and has Devin Nunes, the former congressman from the San Joaquin Valley, running Truth Social, which jumped up to $175 per share at one point. And I've heard all this stuff about Trump returning to Twitter, and Elon's going to allow him to return to Twitter. First of all, I wonder why he would do that when he's got so much, over $1.5 billion wrapped up in the SPAC that is now Truth Social. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And
I think to answer that, he'll probably have some sort of official Twitter campaign, message he'll have a there's my Twitter, and then there's the Adam Carolla show. And so he'll have the Donald Trump for re-election campaign that his, associates run on Twitter, probably, and then he'll have his personal thing somewhere else.
I'm very fascinated to see how he kind of navigates that, given the fact that he's got Truth Social and the SEC is over there ready to pounce at any one time. But then how do you justify, maybe justify is the wrong word, how do you reconcile all of the people going crazy about Elon Musk? All of a sudden, Elon Musk, who, God forbid, he's the world's richest man, but for whatever you want to say about him, he also has done some pretty amazing things. But then what do you say about Jack Dorsey, who says that Elon Musk, who's quoted today, aka Blockhead, is quoted as saying that Musk can return, or is singularly able to return Twitter to where it should be, as opposed to, and I thought that Dorsey took kind of a not so veiled shot at the Twitter board at the same time. And so then how do you reconcile that? The guy who actually, for lack of a better term, invented or created or curated Twitter in the first place.
Well, he's got F me money. So people start getting real truthful when they have F me money. And
that's why I always say that about politicians. You know, the Kennedys could always be very ethical because they had Grandpa Joe's money in the trust fund. It was very easy to be very ethical.
I think what you saw with Twitter was kind of a very accelerated version of what we were talking about on college campuses a few minutes ago, which is college campus used to be kind of a neutral place, and it was a place you could come to and share ideas and expressions, and literally the square back then. Now we have a virtual square. So if you take a look at college campuses, they've been around for a long time. They weren't necessarily political left or right. They just sort of, you can come in and speak from the conservative side, and then we have another guy who's going to come in from the left side, and we'll hear him out. And it took years to sort of convert that to what it is now, which is kind of sort of a left-wing think tank now. Twitter has done that, you know, what it took colleges 200 years to do, they've done it in 20 years. They've converted it into kind of a left-wing think tank in a very short period of time. But that's how it goes. That's the direction. They never stay. Things cannot stay completely neutral. They have to sort of take a direction. And as they start taking that direction, they start attracting more like-minded people. You know, is there a conservative college professor on a campus today? I mean, you know, what is it? 7%? 3%? I mean, it probably used to be.
they're mostly corralled around it between Claremont and Dartmouth.
Right.
Other than that, it's so few and far between.
Twitter just sort of got done what college campuses got done in a very accelerated period of time, and it builds up because, like I said, you start hiring people that share your views politically, socially, and next thing you know, the whole board is that. So what Elon is doing is he's just saying, I'm not saying we're going to convert this to Trump University. I'm saying we're just going to get back to what we used to be, which is anyone is welcome to come up here and share their opinion.
Well, you know, speaking of kind of evolutions, Gary and I text quite a bit about various stories. And I've noticed, you might remember there was a story running around that was broken by the San Francisco Chronicle, or AKA the SF Gate, about Dianne Feinstein, and even Democratic senators saying, you know, the lights, basically she's lost her acuity and is degenerating. And I was, you know, I think part of the reason the story had so much resonance, if you will, is because, wow, this is coming from the kind of paper of record of San Francisco. And then we were talking last week about the LA Times and how the editors can't seem to figure out what they're doing from one day to the next. One day they're pushing back against Gavin Newsom because he's abandoned apparently these California first choice principles, which I don't know where they're written. They're clearly not in the California Constitution, that housing is the first principle when it comes to homelessness. And he's now realized, or at least he's putting forth a bill that's running through the legislature, which says mental health becomes the priority, or you start with mental health and then work from there. And the Times is slamming that. And then the very next day, they're printing something about the spike in overdoses amongst the homeless that has been now chronicled, as if the left column doesn't know what the right column is doing in the same paper. And then I read today and sent it to Gary. They've done a pretty comprehensive study here. Look at this. San Francisco, and mind you, once again, This is, I believe, Gary, is it from the SF Chronicle or
yes,
the
it
SF Gate? Yeah. They spend millions of dollars to shelter its most vulnerable residents in dilapidated hotels. And guess what they're finding? That the people are dying of drug overdoses. They're just at phenomenally alarming rates. That there is drugs running rampant, mental illness running rampant in these places. And who would have guessed? Because I thought this was just a housing issue, wasn't it?
Here was a stat that I that stood out to me. 14% of all confirmed overdose deaths in San Francisco for a 1-year period occurred in the buildings that these people are discussing, where less than 1% of the city's population lived in them.
That's astounding. Yeah,
think about that. And here's the paper record. I mean, are people are they reversing or dropping their subscriptions because all of a sudden somebody at the San Francisco Gate dared to point out maybe these policies we've been following were wrong? Maybe there's a problem here with the data. I thought following the science or following the data. Wow, we didn't. Unlike in LA where they kind of run Dr. Drew out on a rail when he suggests, or it comes with the temerity to suggest that there's a problem with a mental health issue here?
Well, all I can say is as soon as Elon's done with Twitter, let's get him on Homeless. I mean, let's just take that guy's giant cranium and point it toward every problem. I would sign off on a new party politically that just said whatever fucking Elon wants to do, give him the money, let's do it.
A few weeks back, he famously tweeted that Twitter should open their office to become a homeless shelter because no one shows up to work there anyways.
All right, well, for a change, I have a hard out.
I was going to say that's once in a while, right?
Yeah.
Every once.
Mark's the hard out guy, but I actually have a hard out. So we got Rust to talk about at length and the next reasonable doubt and many other stories chambered for you guys. So you can go to adamcarolla.com for all the live shows. Indianapolis coming up May 6th and 7th at Helium Comedy Club. Mark, what do you got?
Oh, you've got to get down to Times Square in New York City. Love Pizza in the Moxie Hotel, Grand Central Terminal. We've got Prova Pizza. We've got the Gigi's open at the V Hotel and Casa Tropicana with the Pierside Restaurant.
So until next time, Adam Carolla for Mark Garriga saying mahalo.
Thanks for listening to Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. Stay tuned for more bonus episodes coming soon.